This Network Summit panel, Why Watersheds Matter, Our Shared Relationships and Responsibilities for Living Well. My name is Erica Bai, and I'm part of the Houghton Hub. I am also a geosciences research scientist at the Great Lakes Research Center, and something very near and dear to my heart, a part of the Lake Superior Stewardship Initiative, so working a lot with K-12 teachers and kiddos. And I'm really honored to be here and to be able to welcome our incredibly inspiring panelists. Today we have Courtney Vaughan and Sarah Siska, Quinn Meawasige, and Joan Chadde, who will be sharing their reflections on watersheds in just a few minutes. I'd also like to say a huge thank you, merci, to Rachel and Courtney for putting together this amazing day of connection, and really looking forward to this afternoon. This morning's session was excellent. And just a few things before we get started with the panel. Earlier, there was a Z-map that was being posted, and I believe Rachel will post the instructions for that in the chat as well. But please be welcome to add your location to that map and where you're zooming in from for this panel and for some of the sharings a little bit later. You can click on the link and then zoom out so you can see where your location is. And then in the very top on the blue banner, you'll see additions. If you can click on that, and then you'll have some prompts so that you can add your place. And again, this was shared earlier, you don't have to put your exact address, but just something that's nearby so that there's a general idea of where everybody's coming from. If you have any questions or discussion points or things that you'd like to share with panelists and with the rest of the group, please add those to the chat. And we have Lindsay Galway, who will be facilitating some Q&A and some discussion once we've heard from all of our panelists. So we're going to get started. We're going to move on to hearing from all of our panelists. Each panelist will introduce themselves and then respond to the following wonderings. And we're going to put these in the chat as well. I think these are things that we can all reflect on from the different places that we're coming from. But some of these questions that we're addressing are: what do watersheds mean to you? What is your responsibility in the watershed in which you live? How do watersheds influence or guide the work that you do? And what is your relationship to the Lake Superior watershed? So again, those questions will be in the chat, and sort of a nice reflection piece for all of us to be thinking about these things. Another point, when we have our panelists speaking, you will see some really beautiful photos. These are photos that really resonate with the speakers and are selected as part of the reflections of things that they're going to be sharing in the next few minutes. So with that, I am going to turn things over to Courtney Vaughan, who is currently studying for her PhD in health science at Lakehead, and has over 15 years of practice in experiential and land-based education. I'm so excited to hear more about all the amazing things that you're doing. So we'll turn it over to Courtney.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I'm really, really happy to be here with this group of panelists. Just to introduce myself a bit. Again, my name is Courtney Vaughan. I was born and raised in Echo Bay, which is just on the eastern side of Boating Sault Ste. Marie. And I'm currently living in Coulee Bay, Chiwekwedong, on the eastern edge of Lake Superior. And as mentioned, I am currently a PhD student at Lakehead University. And really what I'm focusing on with my research is how we can use the canoe, the big canoe, the canoe of my ancestors, as a tool to creating conversations, water-based conversations, watershed conversations, on eco-social health and how we build that dialogue across borders, across colonial borders. So I'll speak a little bit more to that, and you'll probably hear from me in the near future as I, continue on in my research. But for me, really what watersheds are, they act as a reminder that we're all connected and that the health and well-being of all of us are interdependent. I've been really fortunate to be able to paddle in the big canoe some of the old trade routes of my ancestors across what's now known as Ontario. I've even met people who've paddled across Turtle Island. And those old trade routes, those old rivers, those lakes, those bays, even if we don't use them for travel anymore, they are that reminder that we're all connected, and what happens upstream also happens downstream. So a few things brought me to my research. As I mentioned, I grew up east of Sault Ste. Marie. These are my two favorite pups. And this is just an Echo Bay downstream from Sault Ste. Marie. And this is the water that I grew up on. It's called Lake George. It's technically part of the St. Mary's River. But during the pandemic in 2022, the steel plant in Sault Ste. Marie had an oil spill. And my mother and my sister still live downstream of Sault Ste. Marie on this waterway. And my niece, my sister's youngest daughter, she was only 2 weeks old when this happened. And my family had, and many other communities that were downstream, First Nations communities, settler communities included, had to truck water in to drink for weeks. And this is at the heart of the Great Lakes. So for me, this was really concerning, obviously, for my own family, my concern for my own family, but also thinking, if this is happening in 2024, if we have to haul water at the heart of the Great Lakes in 2024, what's that going to look like in 2030? What's that going to look like in 2050? And that was really concerning. And that's really was like what grounded me to go back and do my PhD and figure out how we can start having conversations about some of these issues. As a Métis person who grew up on the North Shore of Lake Huron or on the North Shore of the St. Mary's River, when I look at my family's story, a lot of our communities were born along the waterways. The waterways connected us, but we were forced outside our own communities and, our shared communities with First Nations kin by colonial actors. And this is a story that's experienced by Métis in Ontario, but, it's a common story across Turtle Island. And how many Métis families, historic Métis families in present-day Ontario, maintain that connection to the waterways. So they found jobs, they found lifestyles that could allow them to maintain that waterway way of life, such as lighthouse keepers, commercial fishers, selling ice, guiding in tours. And these are some of the things that many Métis people did and continue to do to maintain that connection to the waterways. My mom, just as a small example, used to spend her childhood paddling from island to island on the North Shore of Huron, just outside of Boating, cleaning cabins for American tourists. But as she did that, she would pick berries, she would fish, she would go to the lighthouse where her father was raised, where her great uncle ran, and again, maintain that connection to the waterways and that way of life on the waterways. So for me, growing up at Boating and growing up in that, that central place where the waters meet, Lake Superior and Lake Huron both felt like home to me. So my ancestors moved up and down these waterways, and to me, they intrinsically understood how places are connected through water because of this. So when I found myself on the eastern shores of Lake Superior in my new home, I was able to kind of reconnect to that, those connections that my ancestors had to this place, to the spirit of Lake Superior and to my own spirit in that way. And being on the lake and being able to actively live on the lake, as well as on that canoe expedition, as you see here, being able to be on the waterways day in, day out and be in touch with those natural cycles of the land reminded me that, I'm a part of that cycle. I'm not necessarily above or below, that all of these things need to exist for life to exist. And again, what kind of brought that all back to Lake Superior is that the spirit of Lake Superior is powerful. I've always felt connected to it, and I know people from all walks of life feel that powerful spirit. So ultimately, through my work, through my research, through my canoe-based research, what I'm really hoping to do is figure out how I can be medicine to the lake as it is medicine to me. So again, I'm hoping to have these canoe-based conversations in the water along the Lake Superior watershed. We're still working out the details. I'm working with Charles and Lindsay on this, but what I'm kind of envisioning is having the big canoe, the 16-person canoe that was designed to travel across the Great Lakes to, handle those big waves. I want to get people from across the watershed in those big canoes so that we can have conversations about what we need to do collectively to take care of the lake and the watershed. And to do that across colonial borders, to not be bound by those colonial borders, but to think of how we are connected through the water and through the watershed. And again, create collective action through those kinds of conversations. So yeah, miigwech, merci for allowing me to share a little bit about myself and what my research is. This is my beautiful home now, looking out onto Gitchagami, Chubut But again, this is, as you can imagine, this has been a phenomenal place to rest, to heal, and to connect, and hopefully do some really good work. So, miigwech.
Thank you so much, Courtney Miigwech. Merci. I really love this connection, this relationship with the canoe, and thinking about, you know, education and place and all of these things coming together. I can't wait to see what you're gonna be doing in the next little while. If people have questions or discussion points, please again add them to the chat. But for now, we are going to introduce Sarah Siska, who will be our next panelist here. Sarah's from the North Shore of Lake Superior and is working at the intersection of social and ecological justice and community food systems, and I believe has a few other things to share, and looks like a love of rocks from her bio and photo here. So take it away, Sarah. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Erica. Thanks for having me, and thanks, Courtney, for sharing. So as you said, my name is Sarah. I'm a settler born and raised here on the North Shore of Anishinaabe-Gichigami, Thunder Bay, which is where I'm joining you from today. My grandparents come from Slovakia, France, and England. My parents are respectively from Northern and Southern Ontario, but I am of this place, and I love this place. But I don't just love this place, I am this place. Many of you here have heard me say this already, but since the South is 60 to 70% water, and I drink from Superior, then I am more Lake Superior than I am anything else. And I don't say this or take this lightly. It's a fundamental interdependence between myself and the ecologies I live in. As Courtney said, I am a part of this water cycle. I got connected to the Lake Superior Living Labs network through my master's degree, which I just finished, that looked at food systems change around the Lake Superior watershed, specifically at the idea of a food shed. So mapping people's visions for socially and ecologically just food systems onto the ecological scale of a watershed. To, as Courtney was saying as well, I try to think about communities beyond colonial borders and jurisdictions. And there's a lot that I could say in response to any of the prompts about that, but instead I'm going to use this as an excuse to talk about things that I didn't get to include in my thesis. And I mean, I could take up a lot more time than the 7 minutes on that, but the prompts for today had me reflecting on what watersheds mean to me, responsibilities, and relationships to and with them. And these questions or reflections aren't new to me. I spend a lot of time thinking about this, and I do often ask the question, or I'm asked it myself, about how I feel about Superior. And I have spent a lot of time thinking about this, but what I'm really interested in is, how would Superior feel about me? What impact or impression am I having on the lake or the watershed? I spend a lot of time talking about relationships and relationships with place, but are they bidirectional or are they unidirectional? Are they reciprocal or are they extractive? Is my way of showing love and appreciation rooted in a true understanding of reciprocity and interdependence that I have with this place? Or am I using these words while claiming ownership and trying to take something for myself? So in the summer of 2022, I did the circle tour for my research trip, and I spent a lot of time thinking about language, ecology, site, particularly separating relationships and care from extraction and ownership. And driving around the watershed, you start to see how so many of the places are named for what was extracted out of them. There's Copper Harbor, Iron Bay, Silver Islet, the list goes on. But as one of my interviewees so beautifully put it, I don't live in copper country. I live in the land of dark fruits. Dark fruits being raspberries, blueberries, etc. They're gifts given in abundance that can be taken without causing harm and that directly sustain us and contribute to our well-being and have seeds that can spread to nourish others. Now, copper can be taken without harm as well, but it hasn't been. It's been over-extracted, causing immense harms because people felt they had a right to take what is there with little to no respect for how that could impact others or ripple outwards. So why am I saying all this, and what do these random rocks have to do with that? I'm going to try to connect these threads by sharing a story of a time that some strangers brought me on an adventure to find some magic rocks, and how my reflex to bring them home with me as a keepsake just absolutely sent me into a spiral. So I'm going to read you an entry from my field notes, which is essentially a diary, so it feels a little vulnerable to read. So I'm just going to dive in before I chicken out. So day 5, McLean State Park. I'm sitting on some rocks about 4 meters above the water. There's a soft breeze on my face and the warmth of the sun on my back. I hear the waves rolling into the rocks below me, the whisper of the breeze through the trees behind me, and the low drone of the nearby road. Yesterday, the water was like a mirror, soft blues and light yellows below the beautiful pinks of the sunset. Today, the water is a rougher blue-gray, and you can see the currents pulling the water in different directions. I know I'm looking up towards home, but the water stretches farther than the horizon. I'm sleepy today. I was up late combing the beach. From around midnight to almost 2 a.m., Jim and I walked up and down the rocky shores looking for Yooper rocks. Him and his wife Linda had invited me out when they realized I'd never seen them. Their wedding rings are made of the rocks. Beautiful glowing stones they collected themselves and then set into silver. A beautiful marriage of their love for each other with their love for the lake. I feel so lucky to get to do this trip and connect with the landscape in such an immersive and embodied way. The glow of the Yooper rocks was truly magical. It felt like I was seeing colors I'd never seen before. I wonder what it's like to be animals who can see in ultraviolet or other forms of light. What a privilege to see, to truly see that which was in front of us this whole time. The landscape, the lake, the watershed, it all has so much to offer us, so much it shares silently. We don't know to look, don't want to, or simply aren't paying attention. I wonder how our experiences of these places would change if we looked beyond looking and towards seeing. Would we continue to extract, to accumulate, or would we appreciate, enjoy landscapes and communities on their own terms? Swimming in Superior has always been my idea of a spiritual, even religious experience. But this feels different. I almost feel like I'm seeing something I wasn't meant to see. I'm here to appreciate, but I am extracting more than I'm giving. So these rocks, to me, they're magic glowing rocks. Others might call them cyanite fragments rich with fluorescent sodalite deposits that glow under UV lights. I prefer magic glowing rocks. I'd never heard of them before this trip, and I was just mesmerized, cycling through all these emotions from awe to appreciation to love for the wonders of these watersheds. Then I started thinking about how they could look to other beings, and I started overthinking, which is not unusual for me, I know, but you also need to remember that I was solo camping immersed in critical theory, which is a recipe for a brain spiral if I've ever heard one. I wondered, what if there's others out there who can see the globe without a special flashlight, that use them for a purpose? Maybe it's navigation, I don't know. Maybe the water or the watershed has a purpose for them. Maybe they don't need a purpose and just deserve to exist out in the open air with other stones tumbling in the waves. Who am I to bring them home with me, to leave them on a shelf just to pull out as a party trick? But then I think about Jim and Linda, these kind strangers who opened my eyes to something special and who created something beautiful by merging their love for each other and the landscape with these seemingly innocuous rings that glow only for them and that keeps a piece of Superior close to their hearts at all times. Confess I did take some home with me. I actually have one that I'm using as a fidget toy right now. I did put some back, but there are others on a shelf as well. But somehow they feel different than other rocks that I've taken from Superior or other meaningful places through my life. So as I reflect on how Superior would feel about me, I come back to this story and think, am I just another person coming here to take something for myself? Or is there compassion there, knowing that there's always pieces to share and that me taking a magic rock home with me is a way to keep me connected to a beautiful place and a beautiful memory? Or am I just completely overthinking this like way too much? That's possible as well. I don't have an answer, and realistically, I will keep collecting cool rocks, but I'll always try to give something back in return. Thank you. And thank you to whoever in the chat explained the rocks better than me.
So as a geologist and a rock lover, I absolutely adore these rocks. And another story of how the rock connects us, coming from the North Shore of Ontario, being brought down on miles of ice, really, really incredible story. And then other stories about this as well. But I want to thank you for sharing and thinking about reciprocal relationships and really fundamentally love, which I think a lot of us are feeling, and that you were feeling safe in this space to share some of your reflections from your journal. So thank you very much for sharing that. And again, if there's questions or other curiosities about what people call Uprolites in this part of the world, we could share some of that a little bit later as well. So thank you so much, Sarah. And we will now introduce, oh, great, Quinn is here, Quinn Meawasige. Quinn is Anishinaabe from Serpent River First Nation, where I hear it is a beautiful day. We were talking a little bit earlier, so I'm hoping it's a beautiful day where everybody else is as well. Quinn has been working with an Indigenous Food Sovereignty Initiative that's servicing Indigenous peoples in Northern Ontario, and really looking forward to hearing more about the work you're doing. So, Miigwech, Quinn, thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. Miigwech, Erica, for the introduction. I appreciate everybody for being here, for listening. It's really important, all the work you are doing. So thanks for making the time. Yeah, so there's some questions here. What do watersheds mean to you? Responsibilities to the watersheds in which I live? How do they influence my work? And my relationship to Lake Superior. So maybe to start, I'm from Serpent River, North Shore of Lake Superior, Lake Huron, sorry. That's kind of where my community is. We're just to the east of Sault Ste. Marie. And so that's kind of where I am. So a little bit about some of the work that I'm doing. I need some context. And that context comes in the way of a little bit of a history. So sorry if this is a little dry for a few moments. In the 50s, there was uranium that was discovered in my community's territory. I was once the uranium capital of the world on Elliott Lake. In the 50s, there was these mines that opened, as well as a sulfuric acid refinery plant that's needed for the leaching of the uranium mining process. And that was built on First Nation reserve land in Serpent River. Up in the Serpent River watershed where the mining took place, there's just been devastation, complete, destruction in ways of like contamination to the lands, to the waters, to our foodways, our food systems. In 1976, Ontario report noted that there's no living fish within the entire 55 miles of river located downstream from the tailing ponds. So the tailing ponds that are located around Elliott Lake are they're estimated to be 200 to 250 million tons of highly generated radioactive waste. That's some of the most concentration in Canada. They don't really kind of do it that way anymore in terms of storing their waste. So these tailing ponds are massive. In the 76, I believe it was, no, sorry, 80s. Sorry, I was just trying to remember. I don't have exactly. In 1 year alone, there was over 30 dam failures that were reported for these tailing ponds. So all of that leached into the Serpent River watershed. 1 month before I was born, August 1993, there was 2 million tons of radioactive waste that seeped into the system as a result of a dam failure. So that just kind of places, what kind of where my community is, and then kind of the challenges that we had. So we didn't really know what uranium was when they were like, oh, we're going to create jobs for you in this mine, all of these things. And we're like, jobs, cool. Like, I'm not even too sure if like the people of the day, signing, even if they got anything from these mines. But as a result, the land was sick, the waters were sick, there was fish that were dying. I remember the beavers were sick, so people stopped eating from the land. So there was a time when, the communities relied heavily on, the sustenance that the land provided, the bounty that the land provided. But once that violence and that contamination, went into the land, into the waters, we know that violence is to ourselves, because we consume those fish, and that also happens. So fast forward to now, I do so that's the history of my community. Fast forward to now, I do a lot of work. I'm a harvester, I'm a fisherman, I'm a hunter, I'm a gatherer, I forage, I just love being on the land. And love canoe trips as well. So, we started a collective called the Waterways Collective. I'm just some young Anishinaabe from my community who just love paddling, and we're like, we need to bring everybody paddling. Everybody needs to come paddle. So we started this paddling collective. We got six canoes, canoe trailers, PFDs. We got, people are lifeguards. We got all of our courses and certifications to be doing it right. And part of that work is doing stuff around like wild rice, So not only do we do trips to like pictograph sites that are remote, far off into the territory, where often our community existed. We weren't, bound to the reserve. We know that we were. Once the Reserve Indian Act was created, we were forced onto reserves. And so prior to the reservation system in the Indian Act, we existed throughout an entire watershed. Our home waters, were our homelands. They were, they weren't separate, right? Our homelands and home waters were the same. And so that's where we existed. And so bringing our community back up into these places is something that we want to do. A part of that is, the work is, I don't want to take up too much time, sorry. So is the wild ricing initiative. So we knew that there was wild rice in our territory. It was gone. So we did a test. I have some really cool drone footage and stuff. I just didn't think I could fit it in here. But we did a sample of wild rice and it did amazing. It took, and it's just like, wow. So this is a picture of, the canoes we got and some of the participants from the community in the wild rice bed. And the potential is amazing. And we're going to I got approved for a grant to do 1,000 pounds of reseeding wild rice, continuously to do that over the course of 5 years to really give some, look at food, self-determination and, food sovereignty, food security, all those good stuff. Being in the Serpent River, there was concerns around contaminants, right? So what we did is we got another grant to do a project around contaminants testing, very specifically on, testing fish within the watershed, testing the wild rice, looking to test, different aquatic species, different things that would have existed within our food systems. And because there's a lot of hesitation from community, harvesting and eating from the land, it's kind of really, there was a disconnection. And so when the land became sick, people stopped harvesting from the land. So it wasn't just the food that we lost, it was the knowledge in itself that we also lost, because then our people weren't harvesting, they weren't, making those offerings, they weren't doing all of those giftings, those protocols, those teachings, those stories, how to process, how to save specific tools, medicine from all of these things, that stopped happening. So that transmission of intergenerational knowledge was just cut. So our work through the Waterways Collective is to bring people onto the land, to bring the elders and knowledge keepers together, to bring people back to this place. This is in the headwaters and north of the tailing ponds. And this is the little final pristine spot that we have in the Serpent River watershed. That's not touched by radioactive contamination. So this is a canoe trip that we had. I was just soloing around, and then we had a drone, and so it's a nice photo. So, but yeah, so that's kind of the work that we do. Contaminants testing, we're going to be getting into this year a lot more. We're going to be kind of doing a wild rice initiative. We got a canoe trip planned, not this weekend, but next weekend down the Spanish River. So, we're just out doing it. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. That's a cool picture there from the Mattawa river trip that we did. We visited a lot of pictograph sites. So we're like, well, let's go to the place where the paint originated. And this is a cave, a red ochre cave that existed. And that's where people sourced a lot of their paint for the pictographs, the rock paintings. So we're like, we got to go there. So I just had to throw that in there because it's super cool. But yeah, that's just kind of the work. People want to learn more about the contaminants testing that we're doing is through Trace Labs at Trent University, some folks down there. We got some directives from the Tech Elders, Traditional Ecological Knowledge Elders group, to look into aerial spraying and glyphosate testing. So that's something we're also looking to explore. So yeah, but you want to come paddle, you want to learn about wild rice, contaminants testing, you chat more. I guess that's all. I won't take up more time. So Chimiigwech, everybody was in Dyke. Thanks for listening.
Wow, Quinn, Chimiigwech, for sharing today. Your energy is palpable, is really exciting. And you mentioned at the beginning about worrying about a dry part of history, but it's really fundamental to that story of healing and restoration. So thank you for sharing all of that. And congratulations on your grant for the reseeding. That is absolutely fantastic. And I can't wait to hear a lot more about the work you're doing and how you're also working with youth. And it's really beautiful work that you're doing. So thank you so much for being here today. And you've put a big smile on my face with all this work that is happening up that way. And again, for any questions or anything, please put them in the chat. And we will now introduce Joan Chadde, who is the last of our panelists here today. Joan, thank you very much for being here today. I've had the pleasure of working with Joan for a number of years, as we mentioned, Lake Superior Stewardship and other projects. But Joan has been engaged in all sorts of programs that are focused on environmental literacy and stewardship, promoting diversity in STEM and STEAM education. So I'm going to hand it over to Joan to share a little bit more about that. So thanks, Joan.
Thank you, Erica. And wow, am I ever blown away by our three previous presenters. You all are so inspiring and fascinating what you're doing. So thank you very much. I feel like I'm coming at this as an educator, and I've been working, as Erica said, I've been at Michigan Tech as the director of the Center for Science and Environmental Outreach. And we are an entirely grant-funded center, which means that we've been doing all kinds of programs over 25 years, and I'm going to share them with you. They have been focused on the Great Lakes and specifically Lake Superior, because I am in the Keweenaw Peninsula, and Michigan Tech is in Houghton, Michigan. And so been working with K-12 students, teachers, families, communities since 1995. And as Erica also mentioned, natural resource career paths are the least diverse. And so we really have made an effort to work with a diversity of students across the state of Michigan, including urban areas, and bringing them up here to the Michigan Tech and exposing them to the wide variety of careers that are possible. So that's just a little bit on the background. So for some of you, this may be some familiar ground, but the first one is, what do watersheds mean to you? So I think of watersheds, people often think of land, and it's really, they think of water, and it's really the land that the water flows over. I once saw a video where this reporter was interviewing people that happened to be in a park, and this jogger is going by, and he's like, so what is watershed? And she looks at him like, what? And he says, well, is it sort of like how water just sheds off your skin? And she's like, yeah, that's it. And anyway, but if you think of it, the land around any body of water is shedding water into that surface water. And so I often like to say, when it rains, we get our report card. And that means that usually when it rains, people want to go inside, but really that's the time to go outside. And we can see as water is coming down streams, tributaries, through culverts into a body of water, that's when we can see the quality of that water. And oftentimes it's kind of chocolate covered, and it could be carrying a lot of contaminants. And so that's a great activity to involve students in, is assessing the health of their stream. And so that's what you can see. First of all, on the left, that happens to be a tributary of the Bad River, taken during the Lake Superior Youth Symposium a year ago. And on the right are students who are assessing the health of the stream. And what's super cool is that, for many years, we thought it had to be a scientist, and they would collect water chemistry samples and take them to the lab, and it'd be time consuming, expensive, and it only gave you a point in time, like what the water quality was right then. But here, students can collect organisms that are indicators of water quality, because these organisms actually live in the stream for a year. And so they're reflecting what has gone on in that stream over the past year. If there's been a big runoff flush of contaminants or whatever after a rain event or snow melt. So it's something that students can do. And by looking at, like, for example, if there's caddisflies, mayflies, stoneflies in that stream, then they know it's healthy, and it's been healthy. So it's a great activity that we have our students involved in. So some of the variety of programs, this one assessing the health of a stream, also includes the Lake Superior Stewardship Initiative. And when we look at what is our responsibility to the watersheds in which we live, I like to also, another saying is, we all have waterfront property. So we all influence a water body somewhere, even if, like, we're just like, wherever we live, we don't have any water in sight. That water is still running off somewhere into surface water. And one of the ways that we can involve students in that is they identify a stewardship project that they could do in their community to enhance water quality. And it doesn't have to be, again, directly on a body of water. A number of our, so again, through this Lake Superior Stewardship Initiative, we have teachers and students will partner with a community organization to design a project that will enhance the environmental quality, watershed, stream health of their community. And a common example, although not, I mean, they can come up with anything, is a garden. And people first thought, well, how does a garden impact water quality or a watershed? Well, first of all, what do you put on your garden? You know, so if it's an organic garden and you're keeping all the soil so none of it runs off, and by growing your food, you're also, it's what you're not doing. So you're not having food trucked in from other places, you know, whether it's California, Florida, or someplace else. Instead, it's like right here. So you definitely reduce the carbon emissions that would fall on water bodies. So that's just one example. We can go to the next slide, if you would. And again, that is showing you, but this one. Okay, so another program that we've been doing, actually, I've been involved since 1999, but it began in 1995. And this is the Lake Superior Youth Symposium. And it's really an international youth symposium because it's focused on the states and province within the Lake Superior watershed. So that would be Ontario, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. It started at Northland College in 1995, and they had a school from Sault Ste. Marie come, and the idea was to learn about Lake Superior from the different points on the lake. So again, they would be learning about it from Wisconsin and Northland College. But since then, this is a biennial symposium, is that the schools, teachers, and students come from each of these places, and then every 2 years it circles to a different host location, which is typically an educational institution. It could be a high school or a university, and they learn about the culture, the history, the art, and the science in that particular area. And we have had students that have actually attended 3 symposiums over a number of years. And so they really get a view of the watershed, and they also feel that sense of camaraderie, that they're working with students around the watershed in 2 countries, in 3 states, and a province, that it takes all of them. And this, I'm going to talk about the Lake Superior floor map that you see there on the left. This is a wonderful teaching tool. The center I said that I worked with for 25 years, I just retired last year. That was hard to do. We first started making these in like 2001, and more than 80 of them have been created, both either Lake Superior or a Great Lakes floor map. But it's a great teaching tool for watersheds. Now I'm going to try to explain to you kind of briefly. I guess we're not seeing the entire thing because, well, we're showing 2 different activities. So first, students would lay out pieces of yarn that reflect the rivers. They've got maps out. It's okay. They don't have to guess coming through each of the states, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ontario, emptying into Lake Superior. And then they take a different color yarn and they create a circle essentially where they're doing the headwaters of each of those rivers that are flowing into Lake Superior. And so now they have a circle around there. And if they pinch that fabric and lift it up just a couple inches, they now have a basin. You could think of it like a bathtub, but a basin. And you can see when you like drop a marble that represents a drop of water, it is going to run off into Lake Superior. So it is super cool for them to visually see this. You know, you hear those words and you don't know what they mean and you can't picture what they are. But when you see that map and it becomes 3-dimensional, students really understand what's going on. Now, what is going on here you can see these cans that are in the middle of the river. it's called cooperative cleanup. And I do want to give credit to the Lake Superior Center, which no longer exists. It wasn't Duluth, but it became the Great Lakes Aquarium, that developed these maps and these activities. That was like in the early 1990s, because when I came in 95, it had been published, and it is available online. So you can just do Lake Superior Curriculum and Activity Guide and you would find it. But anyway, so those cans represent pollutants, and the students have to remove those pollutants. And they are doing that. I think of it like a sun, the rays of a sun, and it's a piece of rubber in the middle. And by the way they tug on it, it's going to change shape. And so they have to have it where it goes around one of those cans, and they tighten it, and then they have to lift it up and move it out of the lake. Well, that is really challenging. And we have them, they have to do it 4 different ways. One, we say they have to close their eyes. So that would be, if we don't have any information about the lake, if we do not collect data, then we might as well work when we're working with our hands, our eyes closed, because we know nothing. Or we could, they have to put one hand behind their back, because if we don't work together, and we don't fund our research or our cleanup, it's like having a hand behind our back. We just don't have the resources we need. Or we would say, okay, all of the people that are on the Canadian side of the lake, just drop your strings. Well, there's no way they're going to get these cans off of there if we aren't collaborating with the 2 countries, both sides of the lake. And so it's such an awesome teaching tool. Okay, that's enough about that. Okay, but then
Joan, I think we're going to wrap things up, if that's okay. If you just have a few sort of closing thoughts on things, so we can have a share out and discussion as well. And I love this activity, and I've seen you lead it a million times. I know it's really hard to.
So
right,
I do. I have a closing, and that is me kissing the frog. Okay. And that is because we won't protect what we don't love and care about. And so I know it's sort of a silly photo, and people will go, you're really going to make that public? But it's just like, again, it's the organisms that are in the water that are supported and can be impacted by what happens in the watershed. And so just listening to the previous speakers, we all have things that get us excited, but that's what is going to make us act. That's what's going to make us become stewards. So thanks so much. I really enjoyed sharing with you all. And any questions, please send them or email, or you'll have links to these different resources on the LSLLN website.
Thank you so much, Joan. Again, I mentioned I've seen you in action with this particular activity, and it's certainly a lot of fun. And I think the idea behind this is also what was sort of instigating this idea of a panel and thinking about watershed thinking, and how all actions ultimately have some influence or impact, no matter big or small. However we're thinking, well, I mean, we heard Sarah talking about, if I take this rock with me, what does that impact? So, and then hearing about environmental devastation from Quinn's neck of the woods, whether it's a large scale or small scale, this idea of watershed thinking and partnerships is so vital to all the work, so that we can thrive, and that all beings can thrive in this space. So thank you all so very much. I'm going to hand things over to Lindsay, who will take any questions. I see there's some comments that have been coming through in the chat, and I'm so energized after hearing from all of you. Thank you so much. I'll hand it over
thanks. Thank you, Merci Miigwech. I started today with a not very full cup, and it's been filled a great deal. And I needed that. So I just want to express a deep gratitude for that. And for you all for sharing your wisdom, your love, your awe, your stories. And what I'm noticing in the comments is a lot of hearts. There's often a lot of hearts in our Zoom world, but there's a lot today. So we don't have a ton of time for questions, but I do want to open up for anyone who has a question, for anyone on the panel or for all of the panel. I'll just invite folks to raise their hand and share. I think with our voices, you could certainly type it in, but I hope you feel welcome to share with your voice your question for anyone on the panel. I have lots, so if we don't have anyone feeling inspired to ask the question right away, then we'll leave it a moment to see if anyone feels prepared to ask, and if not, I will go ahead. Charles, not a surprise.
I didn't need
Charles
to go
always.
first, but I
Go
kind
ahead, please.
of, okay. First off, I just want to echo the praise. Thank you so much for all of you. It was really, really amazing to hear about all this great work. And I guess my question, it's a bit of a selfish question from the perspective of like why we wanted to do this in the first place, is really around, I know some of you spoke to this, so maybe I'll pose this question to just whoever wants to answer, which is about like connecting, right? Like, so for example, Quinn, I've been texting you and I sent you an email, like I'm listening to your work and I'm going, oh, like we're doing glyphosate stuff and we should talk. And you know, and then even Joan, like we've never met and I'm hearing what you're doing. And I'm saying, well, Lindsay and I are doing this work, trying to like do education work in the high schools and work. And I guess, so my question is, and I'll connect with you all offline about the details of your work, but I guess my bigger question is just like recognizing the realities of the Lake Superior watershed, which is what we've been talking about, of how big it is, how difficult it is to physically get places. I mean, you know, can't really just take a boat across the lake. There's no airlines, like the drive is very long. Like from your perspectives, like how do we connect this work? How do we connect with each other? How do we share what we're doing? How do we build together? How do we do this? Like, this is the question I'm consistently wrestling with. Like, Quinn, how do you, beyond obviously you and I connecting, like there's probably other people doing this work too. How do we connect with those people, do you think? How do we do this? That's my question.
Quinn, can we start with you? It seems like you're about ready to share. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. Like there are numerous like networks out there. I am on, different Great Lakes networks and things like that. So that is good. That is, they cross over the borders and things like that. But yeah, I don't know if there's like, I don't know if this is the platform for it to happen, but it seems like there's, a great amount of folks with, wealth of knowledge and experience and positioned in many different ways to kind of do some good stuff. So yeah, I'm not really too sure. That's a good question. So I'm open to that as well. Like I don't really have any answers, and I guess being here is how I can learn and find ways that I can continue to contribute. So very good question.
Thanks. Anyone else from the panel?
Well, I really like in-person experiences and interactions. I have to say, I'm still really inspired by everything you all said today. So it still worked. Maybe it's a impetus now. Like I'm like really embarrassed to say that, Sarah, I haven't seen the Yuba Rocks. And I'm like, oh man, my friend just said she was going out there, but I was like, well, I never could find a Petoskey stone. How am I going to find a Yuba Rock? I'm just like, I'm not good at this anyway. But I'm like, I'm going to do that. And so I think it can work. I mean, some of this will work. I'm not saying it's the best or always, but it definitely could be a starting point. Anyway, that's a thought. Certainly in person. That's why the Lake Superior Youth Symposium, but not everyone can get to that. So this will work too.
This is something I've been thinking about a lot, as you know, Charles, in my research, but especially having had the experience of being able to canoe slowly across, the watersheds, plural. We got to be part of a lot of few watersheds during that trip. And it's something I'm constantly thinking about. I'm constantly looking back at my ancestors and saying, how did they connect across the lakes? And a lot of that was through the big canoes, smaller canoes for the riverways, also sailboats. And I think a lot about slow travel and how that can teach us to better relate to one another and better relate to the land. We often, are so busy, go, go, go. We need to be at this meeting. We need to fly here. We need to drive here. But how do we actually slow that down so that we can create more meaningful conversations and more meaningful relationships? That's really something I'm hoping to emphasize in my research. But that's, yes. And again, like Naren said, that connection to the wind and water while you're doing it. So how does the wind and water, how does the land speak when you're doing slow travel in that way?
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Sarah, did you want to add, or should we take a question from Heather? Okay. Heather, please.
I feel like it's a related one. I think a lot about a resilient relationship a profound one that allows us to shift our assumptions and the things we're blind to because they're outside our everyday pattern of life, even if they are profoundly necessary to it, to a new relationship and trying to reconnect with so many people that you feel should care like you care and certainly share the same watershed that we're also passionate about. So between making it a profound communication and making it a broadly impactful communication, how do you guys find yourselves weighing your decisions? What do I want to do to broaden the impact of my ideas and my work?
I'm personally, I'm a bit of a hermit, and in the past have been quite, not on social media purposefully. And as I'm re-entering the world of social media, and I do think that is one way to kind of expand that reach piece. I mean, obviously, this virtual summit is one way to bring conversations together. We do have this tool, and I think we're still trying to figure out how to use it in a meaningful way and create those meaningful connections. But certainly for me, that storytelling component through social media is I think one way we can kind of start exploring that, expanding that network, expanding those connections beyond the watershed.
Thanks, Heather. One thing that I think is really useful to actually think about in relation to that is watershed thinking. And, you think of, say, Thunder Bay, right? We're on this north shore of the lake. The water might start here, and then it'll flow down to the Michigan side. Then it'll flow out to other watersheds and go into the global system. It'll come back around up north. It'll flow back down to where we are, cycle back through our bodies and go. And one thing that we know is well, balancing the need for global change while also not being disempowered by the need to do something that's huge and overwhelming and kind of abstract. And when you start in that small, meaningful place where you're making an intervention, even if it's small, you're building community with people, you're making a difference, that just like the water will flow through the watershed, that's going to flow to the next place. So maybe you're doing a youth symposium and there's one kid there who's like, you know what, this is awesome. I'm going to study this. Then they end up doing something great. And then they go and they move to a different watershed and they inspire someone else to do something. So I think there's a degree to which there's always going to need to be some people who are working on that like broadly meaningful global scale and some people who need to be working on that really intimate scale. But I think that intimate scale can actually help make the global scale feel more attainable because you can build that sense of hope and community that can support you to actually do those larger things in other places.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Sarah. And this is something so I think profound about watersheds is that they really help us with this nested, layered connections across scales from our local through to our regional, through to our global, in both our thinking and our doing, which is something so beautiful and profound. Thank you, Heather. Okay, I have the okay from Rachel to extend a little bit beyond. So we might just be 5 minutes late, but we have our little lunch break and folks will go and do that. So Rachel, I'm going to go ahead and take your question. I think we have just enough time for that. Go ahead, make it quick.
Yeah, I was just wondering if folks, we've talked about how we connect with one another, and I think part of what we're also trying to do is connect with our watershed. And a lot of what I heard from folks talking about who are in this network is that they would sort of say, well, it's interesting, but I don't do watershed work, right? Sort of end of sentence, because they thought of themselves in a certain sector or thing that wasn't traditionally whatever we consider watershed work. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts for, I don't know who all is on the call, but how people might begin to explore reframing around maybe any work could be watershed work, or how do you start thinking about how your work might relate to a watershed, or you might relate to a watershed, even if it's not what you have thought so far, or not traditionally in that Western knowledge thought of as watershed work. So anyway, if anyone has thoughts about how we might connect with that concept or bring it into our workplaces, that would be lovely.
Great question. Also challenging for sure. Does anyone have thoughts?
Yeah, good question, Rachel. Yeah, for me, like I don't have a job that like this is my job to do contaminants testing. It's just as the youth run initiative, like young people, right? So, and we started because like initially the grant was like, it's about water. I'm like, well, water is connected to food, it's connected to land, it's connected to fish, it's connected to everything, it's all connected. So how do you separate them? So our initial thing was like, we just want to talk about fish and the health of the fish. And then it became like, well, what about other things like wild rice? What about contaminants there? What about beaver? If we eat beaver, are those things healthy, right? Like, what about the leeks that grow on the riverside? Like, all of these things started to, be tied into, the health of the watershed. So it wasn't just water anymore. It was everything else that the water provides for, the abundance that exists because of that water, and the health of that entire system as a result of the health of that water. So, and another thing was like, I used to be really hard on myself when I think about the contaminants of that water of my land, my territory. But that doesn't mean it's not deserving of love. Doesn't mean it's not still deserving of care. And so I come to learn that and to be kind to myself and to the land itself, because it's been through a lot, right? So yeah, it's just some thoughts.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Quinn. I'm going to ask a final question of each of you, and actually I'll pose it to all of us. And so folks who are feeling called to add something to the chat, please do. The question that I want to end with is if you have a message to share to our watershed, in a short thought, like a sentence or so, what is it? And I'm going to start with Courtney, because I know you're already thinking about this a lot, and then we'll move through our panel. Courtney.
To me, the more we centralize exactly what Quinn was saying, water at the base of thinking, Indigenous people manage 85% of the world's biodiversity because they're living on the lands the way their ancestors did and promoting biodiversity and promoting life. And at the base of that is that water-centric thinking, watershed-centric thinking. So when I think of, what I want to say to Lake Superior and to the watershed more broadly, obviously Miigwech, like, thank you for the medicine, thank you for the life, the nurturing. Every morning I get to look out and be invigorated and nourished. And all I want to do moving forward is figure out how I can give that back. How can I also nourish the lake, like Quinn was saying, how can I be kind to the waterways that sustain me and give me life? So, how do I centralize that and how I do that moving forward in all the work that I do?
Thank you, Quinn.
Yeah, one word. Word that comes to mind immediately is Wabandadzajik, Ojibwe word, and roughly translates to future generations, but how it's broken down is like Waban is like dawn. That time of day when it's like the sun is coming, there's no stopping the sun, and it's coming, So Wabandadzajik are like those people, that are just over the horizon. They're not yet here, but they're coming, So that's kind of the thinking that I want to leave everybody with, that's kind of why I do the work. And so I thought that would be that. Let me go check.
Sarah?
So there's a lot you could say, or I could say. I think the main one would be that the watershed is not just a setting that I live my life on, but is a fundamental part of it. And this, I think, connects to that last question. And I think about the difference between that, like, the hierarchical triangle with the humans on top, and then the animals and the plants and the land and the water, versus a circle where the humans are actually just part of that. And I think that's, well, even looking at Betty's comment in the chat there, these are not necessarily new relationships. They're ones that have to be nurtured and strengthened. And the idea that we are separate from the watershed that we're in, or the idea that any work that we're doing doesn't impact the watershed, I just think is wrong. And I think it speaks to an enclosure of thinking of what a watershed is and what we are, and where the bounds between us and our communities are. So I'll leave it there.
Great. And Joan?
First, Quinn, I love that. I love the dawn, and I make sure I get up every morning so I can see it. But I love that the sun is coming. Thank you. So I'm going to leave you with the final thought. Find your frog. or whatever motivates you to instill environmental stewardship in others and yourself. We all have those things that are so special to us. We know Sarah's is Upper Rocks, at least for now. Anyway, and Wild Rice and Quinn, all those wonderful things that you're working on. And and Courtney, thank you. I've been inspired by all of you. So find your frog. That's the final thought. Thank you.
My 5-year-old's going to love that one. I'm going to tell him that later. Wow. Thank you so much, Melcy, Meawasige. And we wanted to do one last thing before closing off this panel portion of our summit, which was we wanted to formally introduce what's called the Lake Superior Waterways podcast to our network, to you all. So the reason we thought it made a great sense to do this today at the end of this panel is because it really intersects with a lot of what we've heard, a lot of what we've been talking about, and a lot of these ideas, as well as the guiding questions that you all were prompted to sort of guide your sharing today. And so specifically our watershed, so the Lake Superior Waterways podcast, excuse me, there's 4 episodes that we've created thus far. And so the first is called Pigeon River, Multiple Viewpoints. The second is Kaministiquia River, Confluence Over Time. The third is Nipigon River, Cascading Diversion. And the fourth is Long Lac Reverse Flow. And this spring, the lovely Courtney will be creating 3 additional episodes focused on 3 additional waterways, continuing really the journey, east along the North Shore towards Sault Ste. Marie. So we can all, I think, look forward to that. So we invite you to listen. Hope you can enjoy. So currently the episodes are so this is sort of a soft launch, the first introduction. They're available on our website. And Rachel, maybe pop in the link there in the chat, or maybe I'll do that after. Or Courtney, you could perhaps too.
It's
and
in
so
there
in the
at the
coming,
bottom.
oh, perfect. Sorry, I can't see that for some reason at the moment. And so in the coming months, we plan to also share it more broadly on a sort of podcast hosting site. And also we'll generate the transcripts to enhance accessibility. And I just want to, in addition to a huge thank you to you all for sharing, for you all for listening and participating as well, everyone here today. For the podcast, I just want to do a quick thank you to Gavin Shields for his leadership role in co-creating the 4 episodes so far, as well as Nathan Puka, who's done some of the sound editing, and artist Betty Karpik, who has created a beautiful art piece and visual that goes along with the Waterways podcast. So you can see all of that on our website. And of course, just to end, before passing back to Rachel, who can orient us to what's next for our day, echoing you all who have shared your gratitude for our waterways, our watershed, and our Great Lake. And also Liz, who really started us off this morning in that way as well. So cycling back to that really important lesson and teaching from Liz as well. Rachel, back to you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Wow. I was so excited to have you on the panel, and I'm just so happy. Thanks for all the sharing, and yeah, feeling inspired. So the link, there's lots of links in the chat, folks. I will add all of those in post website communications with emails and recording links, and we will get them on the summit page website. Probably Friday at the pace I'm going, but they will be up soon. So you don't have to frantically save them, but you certainly are welcome to. So right now we've got a 25-minute break, lunch break, or whatever you need to do. And then starting back up at noon Central Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time is the first of our connection chats. So everybody will join the same Zoom link. So you just keep coming back to the Zoom link throughout the day at whatever point you want to join us. If you don't want to join us until, connection chat 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, then just pop back in at those appropriate times. It's posted on the website there. Once you're in the main room, we'll just say like, what are you hoping to talk about today? We'll get some stuff in the chat and we'll get you into breakout rooms. A reminder to try to bring your most extroverted self for 45 minutes. It's easy for me, I'm an extrovert. So it's easy for me to say that, but I know it can be challenging, but with this virtual format, we kind of need it. And then hopefully you can chat with each other and see what you're working on, and maybe get an email address or get some potential ideas going of what you might want to do, or even just, hang out and get to know some people around the lake. So that's what we're really hoping for. Thank you, everyone. Meawasige. I will leave this open, but we'll turn everything off. Go ahead and turn your videos off and etc. And we'll be back in a bit. Get some sustenance, folks. We'll see you soon.
you.